How much do we pressure our kids to do their best? Lulu, what do you think?
You know, I think at least for me and my parenting style, what I tell my 6 and 8 year olds is that I'm not here to be your friend. Mom and dad are not your friends. We're your parents, and we're here to. You're an adult in training. That's what I call it. And so the things that we teach you or that we punish you for, it's to make you the best adult that you can be. And again, because I have boys, I use my husband as the example. I say, you know, look at dad. Look at what a wonderful husband he is. Look at what a great father he is. Look at how hard he works for us, and look at what a wonderful man he is. We want you to be just like Papa, an awesome person. I feel at times though, with my 8 year old in particular, I think that perhaps we that causes a little bit too much pressure for him because he's a pleaser. And so wanting to do his best is sometimes our best, but not his best. So we, without really realizing what we're doing, we're really pressuring him to please us versus doing his best. If you guys catch on to what I mean. So I think at times we pressure, especially our 8 year old, without meaning to, and that to me obviously is very disturbing that we tend to do that a lot. And I think as with most families, more the older child, unfortunately, than the younger one.
Okay, what about you, Valeska?
Well, I wanted to ask Luli actually before going into it, as far as when you're talking about the best, like, could you give us an example as far as, because it's so generic, it's general, so that's why I was curious.
What I'll give you actually a really, really good example. That's something that is very recent that happened in my family. Again, talking about my 8 year old, we had him in soccer he's been doing soccer since he was 3 years old. But the past couple of years, it's gotten very, very much more competitive. Okay. And I'm the kind of mom that, you know, as I said in the last show, I get a lot of slack from some moms sometimes on the field because they tell me that I'm very competitive, and I am competitive. But even more than being competitive, I'm realistic. And I know that on the field, my children are learning much more than just how to kick a ball and how to make a goal and how to play defense. I feel that they're learning commitment and dedication and respecting authority and how to work in teams. So for me, the commitment that they make to a team is very important. Yes, it's great to have a good time, and winning isn't everything. But I always like to take the more realistic approach, because my approach in parenting is you're an adult in training. So with my older son, again, it took us about 1.5 years to finally realize what the challenge was. And it ended up being that he's not a competitive child. And so he would tell us, you know, he just wasn't really interested, and we would tell him, just go out and do your best. And it took a while for us to realize that all he was doing was going out onto the field and playing to please us. The playing soccer was no longer something that he enjoyed. He was just doing it to please us. And all the while we thought that he was loving playing soccer, and so we were pushing him of try harder and you can run faster, and he, you know, I think that's where we struggle, my husband and I, with him, is because this kid has such an amazing athletic ability. He runs so fast, and he's just a very strategic player, but he's not competitive. And so it almost became this striking of a balance, if you will, of where do we draw the line where we're pressuring him too much to play in competitive sports, because we want to teach him the value of working in a team environment, and again, the commitment and the dedication and the respect of authority and so on. But then how do we also respect the fact that he's not competitive? And so the challenge is, you know, he's 8 years old. Are we pressuring him too much? Or is this a lesson that he's going to need to learn, but maybe we just slow it down a little bit? So that's actually what we just did. We pulled him out of soccer in the middle of the season. And the two big rules in the Balapoji household are you do your best and you don't give up. And unfortunately, the not giving up backfired on us, because he didn't feel comfortable telling us that he didn't like soccer because he interpreted that as giving up.
Right.
So, you know, it makes me very emotional to even talk about it because, you know, for a while there, I felt like such a failure as a mom because here I was pushing him with all the best intentions in the world of teaching him these life lessons. And what I was really doing was almost forcing him to a point where he really wasn't enjoying any of it. And he ended up not learning much. And it affected his self-esteem, which for me is so important.
Have you looked into introducing him into others, like just introducing, like doing a 1-week trial with different sports or
Yes,
art?
well,
or drama?
my kids have done all kinds of sports, and the challenge with him is that he doesn't want to do anything. So we little by little, and again, it's not about sports, it's about anything. So at the beginning of the summer, you know, my husband and I sat there and we said, what do you want to do? And we thought of like 13 things, you know, drawing classes, chess, sailing, I mean, underwater basket weaving. We're down for really.
Yeah, what is he passionate about?
And we didn't even care what it cost. I mean, that was kind of scary when we got so desperate where we were like sailing. That's like $1,000 a week. Who cares if the kid was but what we found was that he said no to everything because no matter what you do, you have to compete. So if you're in drawing, you're going to be drawing with other children. And so his challenge is drawing with other children around him that are better than him. You see, so that's the challenge with him. So thankfully, I have an army. I have a wonderful, very united family. My mom has her doctorate in education. I have a sister that's a teacher. So it's really great because they pull him aside and have conversations with him to try to get him to realize, okay, let's do sailing. And that's the deal. A couple weeks ago, my husband struck up a deal with him where he's going to do sailing lessons at the beginning of next summer, but he's not going to do any tournaments. So if there's any tournaments involved, he's not going to do them. And that was our deal. Whereas before we were saying, well, you know, he was in judo, for example, for about a year. And we would say, well, you know, you need to go into the tournament. That's the point of judo. And so what ended up happening was we turned him off to judo because we didn't realize what we were doing. We were pressuring him to compete. And again, all along, we thought that we were doing good for him. For my 6-year-old, all of that would have been great. But for my 8-year-old, it wasn't what was right for him. So I'm looking forward to Stella giving me some good advice on this one because it's been quite a challenge for us.
What's interesting about this current question is that you took it very personally and could relate it to your children, and I think probably Valeska will say she did the same. But to me, it was like a global question because I have a 13-month-old and I have a 21-year-old stepson.
Right.
So it was really to me about that I do think we are pushing our children as a society too hard, and the onus is always on success. You know, what car do you drive? What career do you have? Where do you live? How many square foot, how many square foot is it? As opposed to happiness, the whole onus is on success. And it really is, to me, parent driven. The thing that was huge about the question of the word best was, as parents, in relation to my stepson, who's 21, my husband and I were eons apart, because when I was, hoping for what my stepson was going to be, I was thinking like a doctor or a lawyer or, a police detective. And my husband was just so grateful that he wasn't in trouble.
Right.
So it's a really good question to ask yourself, what is your version of best? And whose version is it? Yours or theirs?
Or theirs. And I think that's where we had a tough time. And I think, again, just seeing what I see in my friends and even colleagues and associates, I think you're right, Stella. I did take a very personal approach to it, but I think as a society, I see a lot of people on that soccer field that then rush their children to baseball and then rush them to something else, and they're overscheduled and there's no family time. Right. In my house, there's none of that. They pick one thing. So it's soccer time. It is soccer time. That is it.
Right.
Mondays and Wednesdays, there's no games or practices. That's family time. My kids love Mondays in this house because there's nothing going on Mondays. So Mondays are the day that we wash the car or we go out for a bike ride. And I feel like what's happening in our society, you're absolutely right, Stella, is that we're defining success with things versus defining success with what makes us happy. And so we want to train our children to have all of these things. And in order to have all of these things, you need to be the best ballerina and the best soccer player, and you need to learn Chinese, and you're almost over scheduling them to be their best, but you're not even facilitating that because they're so overscheduled that there's no family time. There's no time for them to really rest their minds and just kind of enjoy being. I think that that's one of the biggest challenges.
We had that conversation earlier, and I want Valeska to say what she said about playing. I said that I think kids are really overscheduled, in my opinion, and Valeska and I were talking about the importance of play. The fact that, you know, which you can clarify. I don't want to talk on your behalf. Like, don't they, why, they're in school enough. Do you know what, like, they're in school all day. Yeah?
Right.
And then they come home with this homework. And I get it, because, you know, we have to be academic, we're living in that society. But, like, they don't play anymore. You don't see them playing. Like, you certainly don't see them playing out. They're all...
Well, it depends. I know I take my son out, you know, immediately when I pick him up from school. Yeah. It's either I take him to the playground right away, but also at his playground, at his school, there is a playground. Right. So immediately the first hour, I have him playing, and then I take him to martial arts, and then I bring him home.
But the other thing is, like, a lot of people that I know and have worked with, it's like they overschedule their kids. Right. Like Monday's ballet, Tuesday's soccer.
That's all, like, martial arts. That's it. Because it's tempting. Like, I want to get him in baseball, I want to get him in soccer, but I'm like, no, because the reality is I have to drive him everywhere, too. Right. Yeah. I got to be respectful of my own time.
Our schedule, too. It's like...
Exactly. So, and then they get tired. Even with just that alone, he's tired. So I just pace it out, and right now, and I'm incorporating it slowly, where now we've gotten the rhythm of the martial arts, and then now slowly he's like, Mom, I really want to go into basketball, you know? So I'm just coordinating, finding out what the schedule's like. But long story short, I know that playtime is so important because it's easy with all the technologies today to just get sucked up with the iPad, and even it does. He has a curfew, like 30 minutes, and that's it. And then when he gets bored after electronic time is over, and I'm like, well, you know what? We have tons of coloring books. I'm like, you're going to have to use coloring books and Lego blocks and go outside to the yard and play your basketball with your brother. But you need to be constructive in finding other ways to be happy, and you can't rely on me to be happy.
But one of the things that you said, which is really pertinent, is he told you he wants to do basketball. How many parents...
Well, that's because also I grabbed the basketball, and I one day just took him to the playground and just started playing basketball.
Which is great.
And he was like, oh my God, this is so much
fun. But
fun.
how many parents have you met that are putting their kids in the sports and the activities because it's their desires, not their kids' desires?
Good point.
Do you know what I mean?
I heard a mom telling me how she really wants her son to be, her daughter to be in soccer, and I'm like, but why? Like, have you ever kicked the ball around with her just to really see if she likes playing soccer first? Because that's how it started. Like, we just go to the playground, we would play baseball, and my son would just whack that ball out of there. And when he was 4, and every time I would pitch it, he would, like, I'm pitching the ball and he's hitting it. It's not T-ball style. Yeah. And he was just fantastic in it. But his passion was so much into basketball and also martial arts. So I stuck to that instead.
Right.
Yeah, but that's a very good point. Is finding what is it that they really love as far as what sports, and, you know, playing with it. And letting them tell you.
I remember my friend...
And you're aligning now the success with what they really love instead of it being pushed to them.
Absolutely.
That's
like,
a good point.
It's not just... It's like, whose desires are they? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, are we giving them a job? You know, are we putting a job on them already? Whereas... you know, it's obviously you want them to find their way. There are definitely guidelines. You have to do homework. That's the rule. That's the rule of school. Like I was talking to this lady yesterday, and she was saying that she has this 12-year-old, and he's a really good kid, but he won't do his homework. And I said to her, so how do you combat that problem? But the conflict for her was she was torn because she feels he already does so much in school. And I said, but unfortunately, he's not going to make the grade, because if you don't complete your school assignments right, you don't get the correct grade. And she goes, oh no, he's failing classes because he's not doing his homework assignments.
Well, what I tell Xavier, and when I explain to him what homework is, I'm like, it's like mom has to first, and daddy too, because my husband went to school for 3D animation way back when in the 90s, when there isn't that much at all. There wasn't anything about the internet at all.
Yeah.
So he's very self-taught. He's a self-taught programmer. He came in, he had to first teach himself how to even do design in Photoshop, how to do HTML, and then with time progress into doing coding. So that's research. So that's like going to school. You're teaching yourself. You're learning what it takes to do your research and your homework. Then you got to be responsible and carrying out those responsibilities. So to me, and this is what I explained to him, I'm like, to me, what homework is teaching you that if you're assigned to do something, you're taking on a responsibility. And by being responsible and saying, okay, I will hold myself accountable for doing that because you're asking me to do it, and by delivering it and getting done, then that's the aspect of life. Because then later on, when you're married, your wife's going to count on you to do different things. That's like, Xavier, you count on me to take you to the birthday parties for your friends, to take you to all the practices, and doing fun things for you, like when we go to the movies and I tell you I'm going to take you to go see Wreck-It Ralph when it opens. I'm going to be accountable and stick to my promise. Right. That's what you're learning with school. So all those homework assignments, because he complains, for him it's very easy, but just get it done, and then you are holding yourself accountable.
So do you have a system with him, a schedule where he plays and then he comes home and does his homework, or does he do you like let him go burn off that energy after school?
Yeah, I mean, and I tell him all the time, like when I was a kid, I remember being in class and like, I just want to go home and play. Like I couldn't wait to go out in the yard because I had all my cousins around me, and we would play, and because I was so driven to want to play, I would literally do my homework in class before I would even get out. But he told me it's really hard to even do it in class. I'm like, that's fine, whatever you want. I go, but the moment he gets out of class, it's just easier to just play right there because all his school friends are there and they're hanging out. And I'm like, oh, go talk to that kid. You know what I mean? Like, ask him if he wants to play ball. But it's almost like because he has a basketball with him, they come to us.
Right.
So, and there's another dynamic there, because then if I'm playing with them, it's like, no, I'm playing with my mom, stop, and that's the whole other thing. But long story short, I like to let him play, and then we come home, and then he does his homework. And then there's times like if we do come home, it's like, I know routine is important, but I kind of observe like what he's up to, like if he's coming home and then we do homework first or something. It really varies. I really don't have like a set routine when it comes to
I think there's a difference between routine and schedule. Like schedule's it's more pedantic. It's like around 6 o'clock, you're going to have your dinner. Mm-hmm. Whereas routines, your dinner's coming after you finished your homework.
Yeah. But I'm finding more and more, like we tend to do homework more later on at night, like if it's right before dinner or it's after dinner.
Does that work for you guys?
For him.
Yeah.
For him. It works. For me, I mean, I'm just so used to just accommodating all around, so. But I'm finding like just the pattern and what it is. And he's really good. Like I'm like, come on, Dave, let's just do homework, knock it out, get it over with so we can go on and do that. He'd be like, all right. So we'll see what happens with baby number 2. But my son's always been really good with the focus. And I mean, and even going back when he was 2 years old, we did put him in a preschool called Fast Track Kids, which was phenomenal out in Sunny Isles. And I liked the environment because it was a classroom environment, so I kind of wanted to just start introducing him to that classroom environment when you have to sit down, respecting the teacher that's instructing, and just being exposed to that. And then when I came here, I changed it up completely, where when we got here, the preschool here was very open play. It was a co-op, so it was very involved. So as a mom, you had to volunteer your time once a week. And, in case, for those who are not sure what a co-op is, but, you volunteer your time once a week in helping the teacher, and it was very open play. It wasn't the kind of structured classroom where everyone is sitting together and, doing their assignments. And I wanted that because I wanted to balance his social level aspect, because I know he had the academic there, but then I wanted him to understand the social intelligence and increase that emotional intelligence factor on his end.
Right.
So I figured by being in that kind of environment, learning what it's like to interact and play with others, would hone that skill, and then reinforce that when we go to the playground. So we go to the playground. Everyone asks me, why is he so confident? when you meet him. He's a little networker. Like, he'll take business cards from my purse and he'll pass it around. He always goes up to all the parents like, oh, yesterday your son did this and this and this, and it was so much fun. Like, he's like just having this full-on conversations with all the adults. And they're like, what do you do to your kid that he has all this conversation? Because they tend to be shy when they're in kindergarten. I mean, he's just exploding with all of these tema de conversación, how we say in Spanish.
So what do you think you did? I mean,
well, from the very beginning, since 1 or 2, when we were living in Miami Beach and we lived in a high-rise condo, someone would walk in and be like, hi, good morning. And then I'll say, Xavier, say good morning. From the very beginning, and of course he'll get, next to my legs. I know we're taught not to speak to strangers, but I also tell him, if you're with mommy, it's okay to speak to them,
So you encouraged him to be social?
Yes. And then if we're going through the front and there's a security guard, hey, good morning, whatever their name is, always by their name. When we sit down in the dining restaurant and we're eating out, what's your name? I'll ask the waitress, and I'm like, oh, good morning, whatever, how you doing? So he would just see that, and again, I say, through modeling, they would learn.
Absolutely.
So the first steps was that, being aware of those around us and making small talk or not, it depends what mood, of course, the person is in. And then being responsive if they are talking to me. That was step 1. Step 2 was even in the playground. Like, if there's a kid that falls down, rather than me going, help him, like, hey, help the little girl, like, maybe, ask her if she's okay. That was the first thing. Ask her if she's okay. Ask that boy if he wants to play the ball with you. No, you do it. No. If you want to play, you ask him, because I finished playing with you, now you ask him.
Right. So
it was always like encouraging him, or if he's like, oh, or if it depends. Like, if there was a moment where whatever's happening, then I'm like, okay, I'll go help you. And then I would just like mediate the conversation and then kind of like let them go and handle that. But that was in the beginning when he was 2 years old, and then as 3, and then later on. And then by the time he was 3, he just took off. We started a year ago doing the whole martial arts thing. It was very tempting to sign him up for baseball because he loves baseball. But it's like, well, let's pace ourselves here, because the martial arts in itself is quite demanding as far as how many times we're going during the week. And then next thing I know, I'm finding myself going to all these practices, and then I'm not having fun anymore with my family. So what you were talking about earlier about having that family time, yes, it's key, because then you find yourself always in practice, always in games, and it's like, when are we going to actually have fun with each other? And then the child is tired, and then we're tired, and then we don't have any harmony in the household.
Right. And I think also when they're young, like when they're in preschool and kindergarten and even first grade, you get very, very excited to introduce them to so many different things. And so again, just going back to my personal story and just seeing what tends to happen is that the intention for a lot of people is not to pressure their children. They get so excited because there's so many opportunities for their children to get involved in so many different activities that there's not enough time for all of them. So you just jam pack it all in to introduce them to so many things. And what we're doing, again, instead of introducing them to become more cultured and more independent and more courteous, is that we're jamming so much into it that they're not enjoying a single second of any of it,
Right. Yeah, and that's what I did. I mean, I just play those games with him. Like the other day, we're throwing the football around, of course. And I don't want to go play football. No, we're gonna have fun. That's your daddy time. You're throwing the football around. We're gonna just have fun time with that. And I have to remind myself. I'm like, it's tempting to sign him up, but then I'm like, no. I mean, he's 5 years old, for God's sake. He has plenty of time to get into that later. You were gonna say something.
It's okay. We all seem to be on the same train of thought, and I think that it's pretty clear that we do think that this pressure, pressure from society, which is indirectly us as parents, maybe not necessarily us here, because it seems like we're really focusing on family time, but pressure, that pressure does backfire. To me, childhood has turned into a race. It's like a fast track. You're escalating to the next level, instead of enjoying the moment that you're in, which I know we talk about as adults, stop and smell the flowers, Well, it's like you really want to have that for your children, I think. And I think it's a good point in the fact that you said people aren't intending, it's not their intention to overschedule their kids. But I think it's great if they can step back and take a look and see if that pressure is backfiring. Quick example for me, I went to school with a girl who was very, very academic. She came from a very academic family. How we talked about the competition which I think we're living in a hyper-competitive world.
Mm-hmm.
She had sisters who'd gone to school before her, you know, and the teachers would say, "Oh yes, I knew your sister. She was good at this. I knew your sister. She was good at that." And at the end of high school, she had a nervous breakdown because the stress, which we only think of stress as adults, but there's definitely stress for our kids.
Right.
Well, I know that I wanted to tie in with what you were saying with your son, and he reminds me a lot of my brother. My brother is a natural athlete. He is amazing in anything he does. But and he is competitive, and he's a silent competitor. My son is more chauvinistic. Like, he gets upset with in kindergarten, the teacher was telling me whenever they have to get in line, he always wants to be the front of the line. So he was born naturally very competitive, and later on I can get into the repercussions of that and how I'm dealing with that balancing act, because there's human dynamics that's being trampled when you're too competitive.
Right, absolutely.
With
my second son is like that, Valeska, so I hear you. I totally understand.
So with my brother, he's great. And then when I remember watching his games when he was playing, he always stepped up to the plate when he sees his team players were struggling. Like, if they weren't stepping up to their best, my brother always took a step back and let them, like, almost run the show. And then it's almost like when they really needed him, like in that whole team playing dynamic, he just always brought it in, and it was amazing to see him shine. And it was like that one 3-pointer they needed, or whatever. Not always at the end, like, it depends, but he would always observe what was happening and bring it home. Right. And I don't know, maybe those are the silent things. It's just finding the passion, and then just seeing when they start to step up in ways that you didn't imagine. So it was just interesting that how we, like you guys were talking about, how are we defining what is successful to you versus what is success for them, and and then aligning it with their passion.
And it's funny because my older son always, my husband is an industrial and systems engineer, and what he does now is business intelligence. So it's all like data and reports and, you know, all technology stuff. And so my son George always says, you know, "Do you think I'm going to be an engineer like Papa?" And I always tell him, I don't know. I just know that you're going to be good at whatever you decide that you want to be. Because he's the son that looks like his dad, and he has a lot of things that are similar to his dad. So he almost feels like, you know, "You think I'm going to be an engineer?" I said, "Well, I know that you're probably going to be really good at things like engineering because you're very good at details, and you're very smart, and you're very strategic. But maybe you'll be an architect, or maybe you'll be a cartoonist or an illustrator. There's so many different options. So right now, let's not worry about what you're going to be when you grow up. Let's just have fun," you know, because he does get caught up. And again, just going back, I think that as parents, again, we get caught up in that. And we also see, unfortunately, our children as a reflection of our success as human beings.
Right.
So if our child is the one that's throwing the tantrum in the restaurant, that's a reflection of us being poor parents. Or if our child is the one that's not singing in the Christmas program, or doesn't have the most beautiful science project, that's a reflection of us. And so I think that we almost, you know, again, Stella, to your point about being in a hyper-competitive society, in my house, I don't do science projects. I facilitate them, but they have to do it.
Right.
Of course.
They're always going to be the prettiest ones, and I don't care. I want them to do the project.
Of course.
But again, we get caught up in that because it's a reflection. You know, my son's science project is a reflection of me. So it needs to be the most beautiful science project. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is the child doesn't learn the science project. The child can't even present on their topic. And the child has no pride in their work because they didn't do the work, you know? And so I think it just goes back to the hyper competitiveness, and then we end up pressuring our kids to do our best so that we look good.
The onus is on the word best. That's the whole onus of the conversation. And I think it's definitely the best that they can be at whatever they, you know, want to do. I was telling Valeska earlier that, you know, I was the more academic one in my family, And my brother was, you know, he wasn't the one that you could get to do his homework. You had to like blackmail him. but I was telling her from a very early age he was interested in cooking. I mean, cooking as a boy wasn't really promoted anyway. You know, you were considered like a sissy, you know, oh, you want to cook. But at the age of 6, he nearly burnt the house down because he made an omelette and he put the omelette pan on a chair that had some vinyl on it.
Oh, no.
And it you know, it burnt the chair. The moral of the story is my brother is a very successful Michelin star chef.
Wow.
Like, I'm not saying he's not just a chef. He took it as far as he could take it, and he got an accolade to say, hey, you're really good at this.
Right.
But the other point to that was I don't remember that my parents went really crazy. They just sort of diffused the situation.
Right.
And then they really encouraged him. You know, he would go with my grandma and make pies, or we would let him make us food. You know, sometimes it wasn't very good, but that's another story. But it was that's what he was passionate about, and it's honing in and finding out of knowing your kids well enough to say what is it that you're passionate about, and let's find a way to improve on that.
Right.
And your reaction, it's like when your brother, you know, burned the sofa, how you said they didn't make a big deal, which is so key, how you react to the situation and manifest that so that it still remains in that positive light, because then they can be labeled like, oh, I shouldn't ever cook again because then it'll upset my parents because I did it wrong, you know. So instead they cultivated that, and that's beautiful, because, you know, it's like when my son starts to freak out about something, it's like, Xavier, I understand you're crying because you're upset, but now that you're over the emotional aspect, what's the solution to this problem? I just want that like always in his brain, because there's always a solution to anything. You just got to really figure it out, and whatever. I mean, of course, there's all process in that, but the main thing is, what is the solution to this problem? Okay, so you're upset that your brother took your toy. So how are we going to go about and talking to Zach so that you guys can do your exchange? What is it that I've given you? So, you know, going through that whole process of conversation, so finally it'll just go on its own and take off. But you were saying.
I think the other thing is what do we really want for our kids? You know, we have to figure out, is it what we want for our kids, or is it what society wants for our kids? I think you guys, I commend you. I think you've already mastered it in some regards. I mean, I'm laughing because I get classed as the parenting expert, and I know, for example, that if my son was to burn a hole in the chair, I don't think I'd be so calm about it. Right. But the thing about pushing, I've had the experience with my stepson, who, again, I had the academic aspect of what I wanted him to achieve. All joking apart, he is very, very creative, and he's taken that in the direction of wanting to be a tattoo artist. Well, if you'd have told me that 3 years ago, I would have wanted to slit my throat, because I still wanted him to be a lawyer, you know, or a doctor. But he's really good at it. He's very artistic. He's very creative. So I think for me, what do I want for my kids is, and this is going to sound cliche, but I want them to be happy.
Of course.
You know,
of course.
Somebody said once that somebody asked them what they wanted to be when they grew up. It was like a school assignment, and they said, "I want to be happy."
Wow.
And they said, "No, you didn't understand the school assignment." And the family went back and said, "No, you didn't understand the school assignment."
Oh my God!
And it's funny that you. It's funny that you mention the being happy, Stella, because actually my business coach here in Miami just developed a program called Discover You, because what he found in the United States is you get all of these kids starting college without a clue of what they want to be when they grow up. And so what he focuses on is teens and tweens on focusing on their passion and identifying what they're passionate about, so that then they can better decide what they want to be when they grow up. And I think it's caught on here in South Florida, and he's trying to grow it nationally. And I just think it's a great program, because we're in dire need of that in our country. you know, like you said, you have to be a doctor or an attorney in order to be successful. But I don't define success as having money, because I have plenty of people that have great cars and great homes and take great family vacations that are the most unhappy people I know.
Right.
And so making sure that you also strike the balance between, you know, being happy and also being able to maintain the lifestyle that you want. But once you have that passion and you can back that up with a way to monetize your passion, oh my goodness, you're going to be successful for the rest of your life.
Right. I mean, I know that I wanted to mention, you were saying something earlier about your son feeling like, you know, how can he be like his papa and all of that. And, you know, Xavier, you know, this goes back to the dynamics of our children watching us, you know, working at home sometimes as well, when I choose to bring the work home, and, you know, feeling like they need to do what we're doing so that they can bond with us. Or a way of bonding, because definitely I do give him that alone time and that attention time for him not to feel like he needs to do that to get my attention. But essentially there is still that dynamic being interplayed here, where he wants to try to create, you know, more vivid quizzes on Rivvid.com about, you know, superheroes. You know, he's like, Mom, just tell me, how can I help? I want to, you know, go on and do that. And I'm like, you know, let's have fun with it. But I don't want you to feel like this is what you have to do in order to be accepted by us or whatever. But do whatever it is that makes you happy. I mean, sometimes like,
and I mean, I'm going to go back to when they're younger. I think it's easier. I think that as they get older, it starts to become more and more challenging to figure out how you can empower them to follow their passions without pushing them, without pressuring them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think what's also key is, I don't want to go the other way to say that, you know, if you're not passionate about something, you don't have to study it in school.
Mm-hmm.
I had a situation with a mom a couple of days ago that was telling me she has this awesome 12-year-old who is a really good kid, but he won't do his school assignments. He won't do his homework. And you know, my question was, how do you combat that problem? And she's like, well, I kind of don't. She was a little complacent about it. She said, because I feel that he does so much in school. But the thing is, when you're going to school, it's great that you want to be passionate about flower designing, or that you want to go home and make cupcakes with your mom.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to also be engaged at school and follow the rules.
Exactly.
So it's you know, there are parents out there that, you know, we talk about overscheduling their kids, we talk about them sort of, you know, over-educating them in the fact that they may bring in a tutor for a child that's not struggling, but they want that child to excel. They want that child to supersede other people. And I think it's a really good point again about the balance or the compromise. We don't only need to find that for ourselves, we need to find it for our kids.
No, and I know that with homework, for example, Xavier, you know, complains how easy it is. And one thing I was explaining to him is like, look at it this way. You're going to school to do your research. When you come home from school, homework is a responsibility that the teacher is giving to you, and yes, expecting for you to deliver, the same way that I have clients that expect me to deliver on results for them. So if I have to go, let's say, to school and do research and do whatever it is I need to do in order to overcome this challenge, in order to figure out what can I do so that they can see those results, that's me going to school. Same thing, and I explained to him about Daddy. Daddy went to school for 3D animation. He went to a technical school because they didn't have that in colleges. They didn't have those types. The internet was not being taught back then in the 90s, so early 90s. But point is that he had to self-teach himself how to do the Photoshop, how to design, and then with time, you know, moving on, getting into coding, and then learning how to do PHP programming. So he's a self-taught learner. So in that process of learning how to do the dynamics of educating himself, he started to learn how to deliver all of that and translate that for clients, and then now is able to deliver. So then what comes with that? Production schedules. And when they have a deadline that needs to be met so that it goes in conjunction with their shows or with their radio, whatever it is that they have going on, they're counting on daddy to come through, same way that they're counting on me. So there's this whole funny thing that I'm like, the results comes in the checks. So I have Xavier open up the mailbox. I'm like, go open the mailbox so that you have our lucky fingers, so that there's a check in the mail when you open it, Xavier. So I'm like, those are the results of what you're seeing, of what we're working, and that dynamic.
And that's key because, again, you said, you're working from home, so it looks pretty easy sometimes that you can, do your work at home in your PJs. Dad's not having to get up and put his shirt and tie on and drive to an office.
Oh, he still has to.
Oh, he does. Well, maybe he's sitting in his shirt and tie. But the fact is that you're showing them that it didn't come easy. That came with the hard work. So I think the research idea is a good idea.
Like being sitting here on the couch when he gets out of school, and I can still get some work done real quick if I have to get some emails out the door, and thinking maybe I should just be at the office and just make sure I don't have the computer around me when I have to get stuff done. But I've been there, done that when I had to go to the office, and just missing out on that time, and him again asked me, why don't you come home and just work around me, and I promise I won't bother you, type of thing.
Well, and I think also, Valesca, just bringing that specific example back to the conversation about pressuring our kids, is that I think that what ends up happening is that we pressure our kids to hurry up. And so it's hurry up because I just got home from a crazy day, and now we have to sit at the table as a family because you basically just missed out on the 2 hours, and you wanna make that quote unquote family time.
Exactly.
And we end up pressuring them to get to the dinner table and hurry up and take a shower and brush your teeth and brush your hair, and all of these different things. And so what we end up doing again is that we're pressuring them. Now the conversation is shifting a little bit from pressuring them to be successful, of pressuring them in the day-to-day stuff that has to get done at home, where, as both of you were talking about earlier, that it's no longer play. It's no longer, hey, go take a shower. And if the kid takes 20 minutes in the shower, who cares? You're not fighting a fire at the dinner table to eat at 7:15 on the dot.
Yeah.
And again, we get so caught up on schedules, which I'm a schedule person, and I believe in structure and I believe in schedules, but I also believe that we plan and God laughs, So I think that that's what ends up happening. So our morning and our evening routines become this immense pressure to hurry up, to get this done, or leave me alone so that I can get 20 minutes of work done. And so what again, we don't realize that we're doing this a lot of times. We're pressuring our children to hurry up for everything,
Yeah.
It's figuring out the difference though between schedule and routine, if you can define that. Like schedule is pretty pedantic. It's sort of set in stone, like you say, dinner's going to be on the table at 6, bath's going to be at 6:30, and by 7 you're going to be in bed. It's like if at least if you just look at it as a routine and not a schedule, right? Because I think the kids definitely thrive on that, knowing what's coming next. But I definitely agree, if we stop putting ourselves under so much pressure, then we can stop putting them under so much pressure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if dinner's served at 6:07 and not at 6, you're still, like you said, Stella, you're still following the routine, and the importance of that routine, and the children knowing what's expected of them and how to be responsible and all of that, but not in such a structured way where there's no flexibility to be able to have a little bit of that play as well, I think,
Yeah.
It's finding a compromise, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, there is no balance, it's compromise.
That's right.
Yeah, two things this particular topic reminds me of. I remember one time we had to get to, typical, we're waking up in the morning and he's getting ready, and make sure he's waking up early. So and I'm aware of that because I hated that feeling of waking up in the morning, you have to go to school, hurry up. Yeah. So it's like always making sure that being aware of when I find myself wanting to put that pressure on myself, like hurry up, because then it's like you get into that habit in life of everything always has to be in a rush, everything is chaos, and I don't want that. So it's like the opposite effect happened. It was interesting because with my son, we were waking up, he was getting ready, yada yada, we were getting out the door, we were running on time, no problem, and he's like, oh my God, I have to poop. I go poop. And he's like, no, but I have to be on time for school. I go, Xavier, there's certain things that you need to stop and definitely take care of, and that's yourself.
And that's one of them.
Huh?
And that's one of them.
That's one of them. And he's like, no, because I don't want to be late. They're going to close the door, see?
Oh, God.
And so he understands the dynamics of why the door gets shut and all that stuff. I go, Xavier, look, this is a different situation. I want you to go poop in peace. And we will explain to the teacher when we get there, you know, what happened. Or we'll explain it in a different way so that you're not embarrassed. But what's important is that you need to take care of yourself.
That's right.
So don't worry. If you have to take 30 minutes, I don't care to take 30 minutes. That's fine. So he pooped in peace. And then we headed over to the teacher. And then she's like, oh, I already sent the tardy card over to the office. And I'm like, that's fine. I go, you know, Xavier, you know, had a personal situation. I had it, you know, in front of him. I made sure. And then when he went away, I'm like, he had to poop, so it was really important. And she's like, no problem, I'll fix it. And she did. She ended up fixing it. I remember when we got the report card, it wasn't counted as a tardy. He didn't have an absence. So the problem was fixed. But the big picture here was making sure he understood that.
Sometimes as a parent coach, I've actually regretted introducing the word schedule into people's lives.
Yeah.
I went back to a previous situation with a little boy that I was visiting, and we were playing. And I said, okay, come on, now it's time to go get dinner. And he said to me, is it 6 o'clock?
Wow.
Because I was interrupting his playing time. And that was a sort of a light bulb moment for me when I got the difference, like from my training, between schedule and routine.
Right.
Like,
That's a really good point.
You can play a little longer and you can have your dinner a little later. But he was like, is it, you know, that was the pressure that the schedule had put him under.
Honestly, when it comes to dinner, I don't even look at the time. It's more like we just have a flow. We just know when we come back from martial arts, it's pretty much 6 o'clock. So that's the time we get ready. So I give him the option. I'm like, do you want to take a shower now or do you want to take a shower after dinner? And then it depends, you know, he sometimes wants to do it before or after. I'm like, okay. And then we have dinner. So it's just more like a routine. Like it flows. Like where if after, you know, martial arts, he wants to play with his friends and hang out, we do that. I'm not rushing, like, oh my God, 6:30, you know, dinner has to be served. It's just, you know, again, we just have that flow where we know, okay, when we get home, that's the dynamic, that we know we're going to sit down and have dinner as a family, but we're not rushing to make sure that it's a particular time. So that's interesting to hear that he knew 6 o'clock was the time. That was cute.
I think also, in fairness, as parents, at that time of day, sometimes you're putting bedtime on fast track.
Oh, yeah. What's that book of
I really do want to know that it's 7 o'clock and you're going to bed. You know? So I don't want to, you know, be beating ourselves with twigs because, you know, we're sticking to the schedule. But, you know, but sometimes it's in everybody's best interest that it's bedtime, quite honestly.
Exactly. Well, do you want to wrap up the show with some final pointers or anything that we didn't cover?
I think the final pointers are that we all are in agreement that, you know, however we came to this conversation, that we do think that general ed kids are being pushed too much, and that the overall end result that we'd like to see for our kids, without being cliche, is happiness, not just success.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks for joining us.